Hey, this is Eli, aka Atlas. Today I'm going to be doing a tutorial on how to draw good and dynamic hands, like the ones you see right here. The first thing you need to know about drawing hands is that hands are very easy to draw. The only thing you need to know about hands is that the human hand has 27 bones, 14 of which are the phalanges. I don't know if I'm saying that right. Ask your doctor. He'll probably know. Phalanges of the fingers, and these are the bendy parts. I marked all of them here. The rest are carpals and metacarpals. The carpals and metacarpals being inside of your palm, right here. There are muscles in your hand, but no muscles in your fingers, as those are extrinsic extensors. These are located on the forearm, which actually control your fingers, which is a whole lesson for another time. So, the second thing about drawing good hands is having rules of thumb. Rules of thumb can be anything that helps you to draw the hands as quickly as possible, as good as possible. Some of the rules of thumb I use include knowledge of the average hand size, for example. The average adult male hand is 189 millimeters, also known as 7.44 inches. The average female hand is an inch shorter at just 172 millimeters. That would be 6.77 inches. Female hands are naturally smaller than men's hands, but in comics or any kind of style where you need to exaggerate the proportions, it's okay to make the hands maybe the same size, maybe a little bigger than average. It's okay as long as the anatomy is correct. There's a lot you can get away with, basically. Rules of thumb are what you're going to need to use as an artist to produce good hands and very dynamic hands. Those two things are the key. The anatomy has to be right, and it has to make people interested in looking at it. As far as the stylization goes, all the shadows, all the textures, those things, as soon as you know how to do the anatomy, you'll be able to stylize the picture as much as you want. The middle finger is the longest finger, the pinky the shortest. Visually, the thumb affects the mood. A lot of lines do that as well, but we'll get into that later. That's important. As an artist, you're going to need to remember those 3 or 4 tips. Index finger gives you, as an artist, a starting point to lead the rest of the hands. This hand is a lot more plain than the rest, as you can see, and there's a reason for that. This one is going to be our example. We're going to draw a whole bunch more hands later, but this is the primary example. Everything's all out and exposed. It's pretty bare. The secret to drawing good hands is there are only 2 things you need to know about how to draw hands, which is the anatomy and figure drawing. Figure drawing helps you keep the dynamism and the fluidity. The knowledge of anatomy keeps the hand looking realistic, no matter how much you exaggerate or stylize. You'll discover your own shortcuts to drawing hands, such as using naturally occurring shapes like circles and squares, cylinders for fingers, all those types of things that a lot of artists use, different techniques. Or you can make up your own abstract shapes like I do sometimes. One thing you'll notice when you look at your own hand, and we'll get into this later, is references. But when you look at your own hand, you'll notice that there are 2 lines on each of the fingers, and the fingers looks like it's in 3 parts. Same thing we did here. 2 lines, darker pencil. 2 lines, 2 lines, but the finger looks like it's in 3 parts. Those are the 14 phalanges, which I talked about earlier. Side of your hand, if you look at it, there's the soft fleshy part, which is your thumb. These are where the metacarpals are, and the regular carpals. And your hand can flex a variety of different ways. You can stretch out, you can flip in both directions. And that's what we want to imitate when we draw a hand. The next thing we're going to talk about before we get into the actual drawing are drawing techniques. The secret to drawing great hands is just drawing what you see and seeing what you draw. Take your own hand as an example. Kind of like this one here. Nobody knows your hand like you. Everybody's hand is a little bit different. So just take a look at your own hand, know what you want to draw, and go for it. The key is not to think about the hand anatomically so much as to get what you want down. Lay out whatever you imagine, then fit the anatomy into it afterward. That's the quickest way to draw dynamic and correct hands. Let's say I wanted to draw a big hulking hand in perspective, coming at the camera like this or something, with some lighting going on beneath it, so it's kind of backlit or something. Well, that's easy to do, as long as we know that there are 2 lines, 14 phalanges, metacarpals, carpals. As long as we know all of that, we don't even have to think about all of that, as long as we know that. Because the key is to draw the hand as you see it in your head, and then you fit the anatomy to that. So I'm going to draw a hand right now, for example, my own hand. I'm going to be looking at it. We're going to drop it into perspective here. Fingers come up. The shape of the palm itself looks like some kind of rectangle or rounded rectangle. The lines are a little light right now. Bear with me. Like I was saying, you can use naturally occurring shapes, and then you can morph them into what you need them to be to make it more realistic. You've got a rounded rectangle for the palm of the hand, some kind of oval shapes for the fingers, and you can round them out with lines to give them more definition. One of the keys I use is actually fingernails. Fingernails actually help, a lot of the time they help me to drop the hand into perspective or to really figure out what angle I'm looking at the hand at. So now that we've got those into place, I can add all of the style to it, and that's the key. The key is to lay this down the way it needs to be. From there you can do whatever else you want to it. We know the anatomy is correct, we know the size of it is correct, the scale is correct. Speaking of scale, we'll get to that in a minute. We're holding objects or things like that. Right now, let's just finish this hand. Just going to be in perspective. Fingernails, let us know exactly what part of the hand we're looking at. Zoom in a bit. You can put one of the knuckles there, make it visible if you want. Because these things, again, are actually there. It's up to you how much of the structure of the hand you want to show. And this is all just figure drawing right now. Like I said, I use my hand as a reference. From this we're going to make a hand. Pinky is the smallest finger, middle is the longest, but when you drop it into perspective, it changes on the angle you're looking at it, but that's basically the rule. Last finger. I like to put the knuckles on top when I draw the hands in a more simplified way. Makes it easier to do. Now we're going to finish off the palm. There's a crease that goes right straight across the palm. Draw where the fingers begin and where they end. From the base upward. The carpals of the hand. The thumb. Some people argue that the thumb is in fact not a finger. We don't have time for that, so the thumb is a finger. Now let's hit it with some lighting. The thing about lighting is I'll probably make a whole nother tutorial about that, but just bear with me while I just run through it. The lighting is going to be more or less from behind the hand, you could say, up here. So that drops the shadows to the front of the hand. And this is called backlighting. Again, I'll do a whole nother tutorial on that later, if you guys like this one anyway. For illustration's sake, you can leave the fingernails visible, despite the backlighting. Makes it look more interesting. The black on white, negative space type of effect. But if it bothers you, you can also just, get rid of the fingernails. We'll see how it goes this time. Kind of like them so far. The lighting is basically just conforming to the muscles in the hand. If you ever put your hand up to like a flashlight, you can actually see the bones in your hand, all the muscles, and it's kind of the same idea. The light just kind of conforms to your hand. So, I'm probably going to keep the fingernails. I'm going to add some texture to this in the form of wrinkles so the hand looks like it's actually got skin on it. I'll explain that while I do it. Probably just drop shadows inside of the hand as well, given the kind of lighting this is. Now the light is casting shadows from the fingers into the hand. And all of this, again, just started from figure drawing. I didn't try to think of all the bones in the hand. I just went ahead and drew the shape of the hand, what it looked like, using regular shapes, and just building from that. The hands were just oval shapes, the fingers were just ovals. The hand itself was a rounded rectangle. You can still see the bones of that. Now the skin that leads up on the hand, draw that in. And for the skin, you can actually look at your own hand, maybe take a light to it, flashlight or a lamp or kitchen light or something. Just look up at your hand and the shadows in it. And if you blur your vision of it, you can just kind of see the way the light hits the wrinkles in your hand. It's almost like wrinkles on clothing. I'm not going to draw all of that because then the hand would just kind of be dark because of the way the light is hitting it. But we can stylize this a bit. As far as lighting goes, I should also add that typically it helps me when I just add LS and kind of drop a spotlight somewhere where I want the light to be. Kind of puts things in a perspective, figuratively speaking. A little mold in the hand. We can erase lines that we don't need. Change. So that's actually about done. If this was a drawing with an actual person attached to the hand, the lighting would look even better. But because it's so stylized like this right now, you can afford to leave it kind of negative space-ish. But that's how the actual light hits your hand. The inside of your hand would more or less be black too, but for the sake of this tutorial, we're just going to leave that visible. We'll drop it down to something a little less advanced, I guess, because that one was just full on with the lights and everything.